there's a bunch of really good teams in the AFC, but that Jets team could beat anybody. I'm not saying they will, but they can. You didn't know. It was a projection, throughout the last 18 months or so. It was this projection of, yes, they can. That team that we watched last night, they can. They can beat anybody if they get that version of themselves. I'll touch on Houston quick. Rich, I took Houston to go to the AFC Championship in the preseason. I think they'll have the best D in the AFC. Them in Kansas City will have the best defense in the AFC. The physicality and the speed that they play with on defense is relatively unique to the league right now. Again, them in Kansas City. After 2 weeks, my concern with Houston is the offensive line in drop back pass protection. It's not been good. I'll go back to last season. I told everybody it was remarkable what they did. It was remarkable the season CJ had. It was a little bit of a mirage because he was ridiculous on third down. He made up for a lot of flaws that usually catch up to you. Week 1, they beat Indy. They don't beat Indy unless he makes 5 or 6 pretty remarkable plays with his feet. Last week against Chicago, only scored 19, and I understand Chicago's defense is good, but their offensive line, again, struggled in pass protection. That's my biggest concern with Houston. When they're not in their play-action pass game, when they got to drop back and pass protect, that offensive line right now is struggling.
Dan Orlovsky here on the Rich Eisen Show, one of the members of the stellar NFL Live program on ESPN, and then Monday night in the booth for Bills and Bengals. Let's hit some of these games.
Bills and Jags.
Pardon me, Bills and Jags. My bad. Before we get to that game, let's use some of the time on some of the other games of this weekend. Ravens and Cowboys. What do you think is at stake in this game, Dan?
Must win for Baltimore. You're not getting to the playoffs unless you win this football game. Obviously, statistically, we know that that is unlikely. And then the reality of the division that they're in is they're going to get more losses because of it. I think that also with Baltimore, they're still trying to figure out who they can be on offense. With the offensive line. The offensive line, run game wise, is getting beat with quickness, specifically the right side. That's how the Raiders won the game, Max Crosby. And then is it lean Lamar, lean Derrick Henry? And I'm not saying that's an easy problem to fix or puzzle to solve, but they have to solve that puzzle. And then for Dallas, I just, Rich, I'm not surprised by what happened last week. I would tell you Dallas, if I was Baltimore, I would expect the Dallas Cowboys to put Micah Parsons on their defensive left, my right, and say, Micah, ruin the football game. If you are on that level, and everyone believes that he rightfully so is, TJ Watt, Myles Garrett, Max Crosby, go ruin the football game. And unless Baltimore adjusts to what they did in comparison last week, I think that Dallas can hang in that game. Dallas offensively struggling to throw the ball downfield. I think Ferguson, you got to work Baltimore's linebackers in the pass game. I think Ferguson, if healthy, is huge. I still believe Dallas survives if they lose this game and can continue to stay afloat long season. I don't believe Baltimore can if they lose it.
And then you got the Eagles and the Saints. Eagles coming off of that heart-wrenching loss on your family of networks. And then I guess the Saints can wrap up the NFC East with a win. The problem is they're playing in the South, but what do you think about that contest in the Superdome, Dan?
Yeah, you cannot feel good about that matchup if you're Philly. Philadelphia has given up about 7 yards per carry on the ground. They got gashed by 2 straight weeks with a very similar run scheme offense. Green Bay in week 1, which Matt LaFleur comes from the Shanahan-Kubiak tree. And then Atlanta, week 2, Zach Robinson comes from the Shanahan-Kubiak tree, the McVay tree, and you're getting the same thing from Clint Kubiak, who's the offensive coordinator in New Orleans. So I got big-time concerns about the Eagles' defense. I think New Orleans will zone run on them. I think there'll be a ton of gashes in the middle of the field in the play-action pass game for New Orleans. Their offensive line is really physical. So that's my biggest concern in that football game against the New Orleans Saints offense. Their offense right now is humming. I think secondly, Philly's going to have to score. I think they can. My concern is this, Jalen still hasn't I guess, settled into the pocket as much as he did in 2022. He still is leaving that pocket. Rich, you're going to hear, I think Greg's calling it. You're going to have Jalen leave a clean pocket. He's going to roll out to his right. And then you're in, oh my gosh, is it going to be a good play or not? And more often than not, like nothing great happens from it. Maybe here and there he'll make something of it. And so I want to see him hang a little bit more in the pocket. It's not a must win for Philadelphia when it comes to the reality of their season. It win-loss. But it's a must, like, go play well. It's a must play better on defense, or the noise will start to get very loud around the team, the city, the head coach, all that. We knew they needed to get off to a good start.
Dan Orlovsky here on the Rich Eisen Show. In the AFC, listen, these teams, they aren't lighting it up, but Chargers versus Steelers, we're going to see some paint swap. It's going to be fun. What's your take on Justin Fields through the first two games? Tomlin keeps terming his quarterback decisions as a fait accompli because of the health of Russell Wilson. I'm just wondering how you see this playing out and how you've seen it through the first two games, Dan.
Justin's playing exactly how anyone should have expected any quarterback in Pittsburgh to play this year. They were going to be a run-centric football team, a good run offensive line. They don't have elite perimeter weapons. George Pickens is really good. Freiermuth is really good, but they got two good backs. So no matter who the quarterback was going to be, indifferent of Justin Russ or anybody outside of like those three or four freaks in the league, it was going to be a run-centric offense. They were going to try to play lights-out defense, and the quarterback really had to be very good with staying on schedule, keeping the offense on the field, not hurting the offense, being very efficient, and making sure that you're controlling the football game, that game manager thing. Justin's done exactly that. And that's the thing that, like, I get frustrated when I hear people continue to say, like, well, they've only scored this and that. One, that's growth in Justin Fields. That's stuff that he didn't do in Chicago. Two, there's not been a moment where he's hurt this football team. And he's getting the ball out. They're not taking sacks. He's not giving the ball away. And everyone just pretends like the two or three plays last week that happened when he rolls out and hits George Pickens deep, or he throws a touchdown to George and they both get called back for penalties, didn't happen. If not, he goes on the road and scores 20-plus against Denver, who's a good defense, and it's a different conversation. So I've been impressed with Justin. I'm not sitting here telling everybody that this Pittsburgh Steelers are going to be the best offense in the league. But I believe if Justin continues to play the way he does and that defense continues to hunt the way that they have, they can play with anybody. There's no question about it.
Yeah, and clearly the Chargers aren't putting it all on Herbert's shoulder. I know it's his ankle that's banged up right now, but they have totally recast their team into a trench brawler.
They are like vintage, I guess, 1990s maybe run game, where what they're doing is they're committing to running the football in a very physical, like kind of like tight end to tight end way. And they are banking on, at some point, you not being where you're supposed to be, or not fitting it the right way with the right shoulder on defense, or missing a tackle and then they hit those big ones late in games. And what's happening is it's almost like the Titans when they were the one seed in the playoffs, I think in 2019, where they were so committed to being who they were. That they weren't going to give other teams games. Like, you were going to have to go and physically match them to beat them. And now teams, what you're doing, if you watch the Chargers play against teams on defense, you watch these safeties, and anti-Mel Kiper-ish, watch these safeties slowly start to creep down, and Justin Herbert is getting a lot of single high safety, and he's just being really efficient in the pass game. And that's kind of the method of their offense. They don't have dudes on the outside that are great. And their defense is flying around, and they're the opposite of their offense when it comes to, they're very aggressive. And I think this is a fantastic game of, like, who's the one to not make the mistake.
Let's talk about your game before I let you go, sir. And so what are you seeing on film as to why the Bills are 2-0 and why the Jaguars are 0-2, Dan?
One team has an identity and one team doesn't. One team's really good with details and one team isn't. Buffalo has, I think, what's going to be one of the top 6 or 8 offensive lines in football. They're unapologetic about they're going to put multiple tight ends on the field. They're going to run their run game, which is not overly complicated. They're going to pull a tackle. They're going to run their zone stuff. They're really good on the interior. Josh is very much so settled in a place of the defense tells him where to throw the football. He's not locked in on somebody, so he's not holding on to it as much. The ball distribution is really good. You can't necessarily key on exactly who they want to be formation tendency or personnel tendency. And so you're really watching the maturation of an offense. The defense is playing very disciplined over the last, I want to say obviously week 1 was okay, but much better week 2. I think the pass rush is really good when they get Oliver, Epinesa, Vaughn, and Greg Rousseau on the field. That pass rush is going. That secondary, that corner duo is a pretty darn good corner duo. For Jacksonville, I've often felt this way the last year about them. They call plays, and I think Doug and Press are awesome. They're brilliant, but I don't know if they know we can rely on this. Like, it's not going good. We can call this. It seems like they're searching for that. I think they're still searching for an offensive line that in the run game gets to the second level, and the pass protection game really handles that stuff. Trevor's got to be more consistent. He has some moments that are wow, and then some moments where you go, how can you make that 60-yard bomb to Brian Thomas Jr. and it's perfect, and then miss that 6-yard out to Gabe Davis by 3 yards? How are you the same guy? And so I think they're just trying to search. The defense is solid. I think the defense is a solid unit.
All right, and then the topic du jour really in the NFL, certainly with 3 rookie starting quarterbacks right now. Bryce Young getting benched after 18 games. Drake May being handed a mop last night, and his coach is saying he's getting 30% of the snaps, and he didn't discount the fact that Drake May might get a start. Is the concept of quarterback development